This episode of Flavor Files is big flavor, small tab. What's our goal here, Tanner?
Our goal here is when everybody's saying, I've got to travel in the summer, I'm trying to take a vacation, things have gone up, I'm feeling a little poor, how can I still eat delicious food without spending as much money while I'm doing it? That's what we're going to talk about. Delicious flavor that doesn't have to cost a lot.
All right. Well, then your Amuse Booze, I assume, is a cheap drink. Or at least
course.
an inexpensive one.
An inexpensive drink. Right, that's better. We would never use cheap things here. We're not cheap people. All right, so what we've got here is a $10 martini. These have become so popular at happy hours all over the country. You can see them. Sometimes it's maybe 12. Sometimes you can get one for 8. But they seem to huddle around that number. And you can see them. It's a classic martini. A martini, by the way, should always have vermouth. I know people who say, just shake it in the direction of Italy. That's enough vermouth. They're wrong. If it doesn't have vermouth, then that's not what it is. But the point of it is, you can see this at a lot of restaurants. They're willing to give you this deal because vodka and gins are generally much cheaper than things like tequila and whiskeys. So it's a perfect way to get a drink that's a little bit more affordable. Or if you're making drinks for yourself at home, James Bond was famous for drinking martinis. You can make a martini at home pretty cost effectively and have a really great night.
Speaking of Bond, shaken, not stirred. What's the difference?
Shaken martinis are going to have a little bit more air in them. They're going to have a little bit more water in them. So the cocktail will drink a little bit lighter, and it'll also not be quite as strong. Stirred martinis, which is my preference, are going to be more velvety, and they're going to be stronger. So I prefer the texture of a stirred martini and the really bracingness of the gin forwardness.
All right, so we're talking about big flavor and small tab. So we start with cheap eats is the wrong thing to say.
Yeah, I don't like it when these articles come out and say cheap eats, because they say there's nothing cheap about creating a restaurant. We've talked about this before. We've talked about restaurant profit math. You can go back and find that episode either on iHeart, Spotify, Apple, or of course always Flavorphiles, PHILES.com. But when a restaurant, there's nothing cheap about the restaurant. You've got real estate, you got labor, you got people, food. So what you're talking about is people that are able to make it a little bit more affordable for you. And if you're looking to save some money, the first thing you can look at is how is the restaurant built? And that'll kind of tell you what you're looking for. Prime real estate, very expensive design. If it looks fancy and expensive in the building, it's going to be fancy and expensive on the menu. And so you can kind of figure that out. If you see pictures where everything looks like they had a squeeze bottle where they put the sauce in perfect dots and they drew pictures, you can just tell from Instagram that that's going to be an expensive place because it's a lot of labor that goes into that.
It may be really, really good.
It might be very, very good. I'm not saying this isn't good. In fact, expensive high labor places are sort of my thing. That's where I like to go, and it's also what I operate. And so I'm all for these restaurants, but I'm saying if you're trying to save a little bit of money, you can just look on an Instagram page and say, wow, that's a lot of marble. Those look like completely custom uniforms with all the kinds of embroidery and everything you'd want. This place is going to cost me a lot. As opposed to if you sort of flip the script and you say, I've mentioned before that a strip mall can hide unbelievable restaurant quality. And so the exact same thing is you see a place that's kind of, oh, it's going to be out in the suburbs, or, oh, that neighborhood is coming up. You're looking for places where that they're saving money on their space. You see, if the food kind of looks like maybe it was sort of tossed on the plate, that can be a good sign. It means you have a bunch of people that are not too stressed about trying to make all the things look perfect. They're just trying to make the flavor look good, or the flavor be really great. I mean, a perfect example of this is I was just talking to a listener of ours, actually, that I'm friends with. So shout out to Mike. He was telling me we went to this Indian restaurant, and we asked if they had wine, and they didn't know. And then they came back and said, yes, we have wine. And we said, okay, what type of wine do you have? And they said both types, red and white. And they said, okay, well, do you know what kind it is? And they didn't understand the question. So they then just showed him bottles that they had there. He picked a bottle, and then they just put it on the table and walked away. They didn't open it for him. They didn't give him a wine opener. They didn't give him wine glasses. He had to explain the whole process of getting the wine to happen, right?
Wow.
And I said, okay, so then what happened next? And he said, unbelievable Indian food, the best Indian food in the area. It's just so great. And he was telling me all about the flavor, about how good everything was, how fresh everything was. And I said, see, this is exactly my point. He could have gone to a very expensive restaurant where they would have brought him a leather-bound list that's all custom printed, and they would have had amazing wine service. But this restaurant didn't care about any of that. They clearly don't even understand it, but they know how to cook their food and what they want to make. And that's what you're looking for if you're going to try to find a place to save some money, but get a great food and flavor experience.
Well, clearly their customer base isn't ordering wine. But I would say don't go to a restaurant unless they have both kinds.
Right. They have to have both kinds of wine.
And then if you ask them about rosé, then you're just done. You might as well leave.
Well, no, in their mind, rosé is where you pour some of the red wine into the white wine. It's actually, I'm sure if you have a glass of white wine and then you switch to red, but you don't get a new glass. Yeah. It's like that. That's what the rosé is, when you mix them on their way to get it together.
No, I picture somebody back behind the bar with a bottle of red in one hand and a bottle of white in the other and mix it. Yeah, that looks about right.
Right. To be totally honest, I have done this before. I've had a white wine where I thought, this has no flavor to it. There's nothing going on. And I have on purpose poured red wine into a little white wine to make, I always joke, I call it house blend. Yeah. Right? Oh, it's our house blend rosé. And that's, for the record, not how you make rosé. But you can fix a flavorless white wine with a splash of red.
Well, you take your chances anytime you go to a restaurant that is new to you, unless friends that you have the same sensibility with have told you this is a really great restaurant. You have to go there. But it's true that many times you and I have gone to some places, and it's not in an entertainment district. It's not in a high-end business district. It's kind of like, okay, we go around here and we go past the strip mall and we turn into a leafy neighborhood, and I guess that's a restaurant. And it can be fabulous. It can also not be, but it probably won't cost you a fortune to figure that out.
No, it won't cost you a fortune. And a lot of these restaurants, they're sort of hidden. It's family labor. They're doing stuff from scratch. A lot of these places, you want to look for a place that knows who they are, what it is that they wanted to serve, right? I mean, popular in Texas, the taco restaurant is sort of famous for this, right? It's a couple of people who make good tacos, and they're going to do everything themselves, and they don't have the money to build out the fancy restaurant. I mean, this is what sort of was the boost for food trucks. And this is why some food trucks can be so exciting in terms of their food. Because you're saying, all I have is my flavor. I don't have the money to build all of this stuff out. But I'm not going to charge you for all of that stuff. My money's going right into the food, which means you get ingredients that are used really intelligently, where they're made really well, where the effort of the restaurant's labor is going into that. They're not out there. I used to work at a restaurant where I was responsible for steaming the tablecloths every day. I spent 2 hours a day steaming tablecloths. So you think about that versus I went to a taco restaurant on Saturday where they basically just have plastic furniture everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, pound for pound, the food was probably better at the restaurant I was eating at versus the one I was working at all those years ago.
From time to time, when I'm visiting you in Dallas, we go not far from your downtown restaurant to a place to have pho, and there is nothing spectacular about that restaurant except for the flavor of the pho.
Yeah, pho, if you're not familiar with it, is a Vietnamese soup. It's really delicious. I don't know if this time of year is when I'm going to be breaking out a bowl of pho, but it is really great. What makes it so great, though, is like the bean sprouts, the basil, the Thai chilies, just kind of throwing all of these flavors into it that make it so bright and really delicious. Another thing you can also watch out for is lots of times restaurants that are very big, very high volume restaurants can lower their costs because they're spreading it out over so much, right? They have so many people coming in that they can really keep the cost lower for you. And that's a great way to look for something. So on the one hand, the very tiny food truck taco stand can be great. Or, the little tiny deli where they're doing everything themselves can be great. But at the same time, you can often find, you go to some place, you find a giant area or maybe a food hall where it's giant, but all the vendors are tiny. You can find really affordable food in those environments where the cost of rent and utilities and permitting and everything has kind of been spread out over a lot more individuals.
By the way, how big a part of the market is that food hall idea? I know there are a couple of them in Toronto. You go in and it's just a great big building full of small vendors.
What's really funny is this was something everybody wanted to make work and has really struggled, because what ends up happening is obviously I love people who are going to make their own tortillas, who are going to make their own pickles, who are baking their own bread, but this is a ton of work. And the idea is I'm going to have 12 different vendors who are all doing this. But what's ended up happening is it's very difficult to consistently get people in who are going to be consistent with their work, consistent when they can get there, that understand how to manage their business. That's really challenging for a lot of people. So what's happened is some of these food halls end up saying, managing all of these tiny vendors is so much work. What if we just create 12 concepts and then plop ourselves into all of them? And so you have to watch out for these because this is growing in number. There are food halls that are actually basically just stations of one large company. Here's where you get your Mexican, here's where you get your donuts, here's where you get your ice cream, and they're all the exact same people operating them. And I guess it's giving you more variety than if it was all just one menu, but it is disappointing to see so many food halls getting converted into that.
The Toronto Star did an interesting project, and they really worked it. And they had a bunch of people who were sampling all of the restaurants. They looked at about 300 restaurants, and then they made a list, the top 100 restaurants in Toronto, the top 100 where you can get dinner for under 100. And I think they're talking for a couple, and that fits into our concept here, whether you're in Toronto or not. And one of the people who helped put that together, there was a group involved, it's an extensive project that the Toronto Star did, is freelance journalist Chris Nuttall-Smith, and he joins us now. Chris, welcome.
It's so great to be here. Great to see you.
Now, I've talked to you on the radio before about this, and my understanding is there was a groupie. Like, that's a major project. You were serious about it. You checked these restaurants out.
There were 11 critics. So I was a project editor. We had 11 critics in total. We had 4 photographers. We had editors. We had a digital team who made the package fully searchable. Like, the work that went into this is incredible. And, of course, we had other resources behind us, and this is what's often missing in newspapers and media these days, is money to actually pay our own bills and do this right. So it was a big project. We're really proud of how it turned out. And, the goal from the start was to serve readers, to help readers figure out where to go. And it sounds like a basic thing, but it's such an important distinction. I think a lot of big lists these days are geared to help restaurants. Nothing wrong with helping restaurants, but they put restaurants first, or the business first, or they put the publication first. And in this case, we really wanted to help readers find a restaurant. And, when we go to sleep at night, to think people are going to our recommendations, and we feel really good about that.
Well, I can remember the first time that I went out to dinner with my wife and had a $100 dinner. And it was so amazing, and my father thought I was an idiot. And and of course, that's a long, long time ago, and prices have changed and everything. But this is what we want to talk to you about. You can go to lunch now in Toronto and easily spend $100 for a couple.
Oh my God! For a person, you can spend $100 on an appetizer and a main course for one. Yeah. So sure, the sky's the limit. And those are often the places that get attention. They get media attention. They have PR crews to bring in influencers who put them on TikTok and Instagram. And it's the places that are more affordable that often don't do that and often get overlooked.
Well, and it's tough. When I think about $100, I thought, okay, $100, I can think of some places. And then I remembered that was in Canadian. And I thought, man, these people are really, you got to be tight to deliver flavor at 71 American out the door. I've got a lot of respect for the restaurants. I was reading through the list. What do you think these restaurants are doing what's kind of the secret for them to be able to deliver the value that you're seeing?
There's no one secret, I would say. I mean, some of them you see scale, Alouette, which is a spinoff of the Aloe group. They do an incredible job. Like when we conceived of this list, I never thought we'd have a place from the Aloe Group on the list because that's an expensive organization, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And then you look at the menu and you realize, oh my God, they're really value oriented. For them, I think it's scale. It's really knowing what they're doing. It's the choices. I mean, you're a chef, Tanner. You know how to engineer a menu so your food cost is at a certain level. So, they're making choices. Other places, there's family labor. Other places, it's real estate. As you get farther from the core, your rent is cheaper. Real estate is one of the most, God, this is a strong word, but devastating factors for restaurants, especially in Toronto downtown. It's your commercial real estate, what you're paying your landlord, but it's also where your workers supposed to live. Toronto is getting so expensive now that cooks who are making low wages, they can't live here. So, all these factors, but, it's also, in many cases, it's international cuisines that maybe use less expensive ingredients. It's labor. I mean, I think, even at the high end, you see restaurants who are not spending money on high-end ingredients. You order food. Edulous is a great example. One of the best restaurants anywhere. Their food costs are incredibly low because you don't get huge portions. You leave there feeling full and satisfied. But the cost of that meal is in all the work that goes to make those ingredients incredible. And in a lot of places, like an Indian restaurant, and that's one example, Indonesian, a lot of Chinese places, South American places, the cost isn't in the ingredients, it's in all the work that goes into making the ingredients incredible. So that's a way for restaurants to be able to offer value is, frankly, they undervalue their own labor.
That's funny you mentioned that because that's something people like to ask me, how can cocktails cost so much? And they say, well, you're not understanding. If you come into the back of Apothecary, you're going to see a centrifuge. You're going to see all kinds of different types of equipment that cost a ton of money. And
that's $10,000 just for one piece of equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how I got my side hobby as a centrifuge repairman because I can't afford to have somebody fix it all the damn time.
Sure.
But it's funny because, all the labor that goes into it, basically nothing in my bar goes from a bottle into your glass. There's some sort of transformational property that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see these at the restaurants. I also noticed, and maybe this is just the Texas side of me, not seeing a lot of barbecue on your list.
Okay, so two things there. One, as you know, barbecue is really expensive to run.
So expensive.
Your protein costs are insane. I mean, the cost of beef, protein is one of the most expensive things. When you go to barbecue, you're looking at a 50% food cost, So that's part of it. But the other part of it, I'm going to be blunt. The barbecue in Toronto sucks. It's just not very good. We went to 4 different barbecue places. We had a few really good dishes. There's a new place that's all over Instagram. The sides were exquisite. They were so good. The sides were great. The desserts were good. One of the barbecue things was good, but the chicken was raw in the middle. The turkey wasn't very good. It's mixed. It's not consistent. There was another place where the meat was really good, but the sides were like prison slop.
Did you introduce those people to each other? It sounds like they're pretty close.
I know. You want them to meet, right? You want them to just combine forces. So there's we're always looking for a consistent experience. And, you go to some, and I was really excited about this, the new barbecue place, and spent a fortune, brought it all over to a friend's house, and we're sitting there having lunch. We're like, this is really good. And then 3 minutes later, we're like, oh. And then a few minutes later, you're like, oh, the chicken's raw. And it's a crappy feeling. You want them to do well. But I'm not sending people there to spend their own money. Not a chance.
Okay, but your thing was 100 restaurants in Toronto where a couple can get a meal for under $100.
Yep.
And barbecue just might not be the place that can do it. If you want
sure
really
you can,
good...
Though. You can. Yeah, I mean, we're not missing barbecue because barbecue was too expensive. I mean, all the places that we went to, before we went, we were really careful looking through the menus and making sure they'd fit our criteria. So that's not the reason we didn't have barbecue. We didn't have barbecue because it wasn't good enough.
Okay, well, there's an opportunity, Tanner.
Yeah, I'll just come up. Chris, you and me will get together. We can open up a little spot for next year's list.
Well, it's a funny, it's a funny thing. And you know this, Tanner. Barbecue is something that anybody who does it as a hobbyist can do it really well because you're not working at scale. Hobby barbecue, making the best ribs you can get is really easy to do in your backyard. But when you're making hundreds of pounds a day, it becomes a totally different situation. And same with brisket, same with everything else. There was one place where they nailed it, and that's Adamson's Barbecue. years ago, and I mean that didn't go so well. COVID.
Yeah, yeah.
You know that story, but he was really good at what he did. Unfortunately, nobody wanted to support him anymore. But since then,
What happened, Tanner, and for people outside Toronto who are listening to this show, he refused to close down, refused to follow the COVID rules, and dared the government to shut him down. So guess what happened?
they shut him down, and you know everybody was like, okay, if you want to be that dumb, like, good luck.
What's crazy is it sounds like the only guy who made good barbecue had a Texas attitude about it, and that's probably why he made good barbecue to begin with.
Could be. Well, maybe it was a cultural thing, but whatever it was everyone was like, oh man, I wish he wouldn't be such a dumbass, because that was really good food.
As you went to these restaurants and you talked to them, did they express a difficulty in keeping their prices down?
A lot of them do, yeah. So generally what we do is, you know, you go unannounced, and generally we're leaving without them ever knowing we were there, and then we're calling them after the fact. Yeah. But, you know, at some places where you go there and you know, the rule is you pay your bill first before you introduce yourself. So there's no opportunity for them to say, no, you can't pay or anything. So once you paid your bill, you can introduce yourself. We all did that at some places. But every restaurant we talked to, and yeah, a number of them, you know, there was a French place, Le Paradis, where, you know, when we reviewed it, their steak frites was $25, and they said, listen, it's going up to 28 because just beef is going like crazy. So there were lots of instances like that where restaurants said it's a struggle, you know, but then others, we just didn't hear that. I mean, a lot of them too. The one other thing I didn't mention is a lot of these places are volume places. They do incredible volume. And when you're doing volume and you're putting less emphasis in decor and service and all this other stuff, you're saving in one place to, you know, pass it on. You know, one other factor that you find, especially in international restaurants, and, you know, I have so many Korean friends as one example, who first introduced me to the intricacies of Korean food, 20 years ago now. Still great friends with them. And, you know, from the first time they ever took us out, they said, oh no, Koreans won't spend money on food. Like, it's so value oriented, and Korean food, especially then, was really cheap. Now that's changed. Korean has developed a huge international fan base, and I think the Korean community has realized, oh yeah, we should value this a little more than we do, so it's changed. But, you know, the value that we attach to food also influences prices. Nobody hesitates to spend, you know, big money on a beautiful pizza or a beautiful bowl of pasta when really the ingredient cost is pretty low. But you try to charge big money for Mexican food, and all of a sudden, what are you doing charging me for Mexican food? It's supposed to be cheap. And so these are some of the things that, you know, it's just one of the realities right now.
Chris Nuttall-Smith is a freelance journalist, worked on the Toronto Star's 100 restaurants under $100. You can just Google that and you'll see it. It's interesting whether you live in Toronto or you don't. And we really appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
This episode of Flavorphiles we're calling Big Flavor, Small Tab, and we've talked restaurants, and now let's talk about at home. Tanner, the ingredients you can use that won't break your bank but will give you big flavor when you're cooking.
I think the first option, and if you're listening to this, you've probably thought garlic. Garlic is that's got to be first, right? Fresh crushed, not garlic, you know, not dried garlic flake. Genuine, actual garlic. You can put it in everything. It tastes amazing. One thing I love to do with it is just roast it off, a little bit of olive oil, and just let it roast, and so it gets really nice and mushy. I love to just spread that on a little bit of bread. It's so good. And we'll get into this in a second, but the way that thyme can create flavor, and thyme doesn't cost anything, is a really great thing to keep in mind. But as we're talking about the ingredients here, garlic and everybody in the garlic family. Onions are obviously delicious. People know that. One ingredient most home cooks don't even know to use is the shallot. Shallot is a backbone of restaurant cooking. So many things that you have are going to have shallots in them. They're like onions, but it's like they're kicked up another level. It's as if when the onion gets really big, it loses less of its flavor. That's why you have to cook it down so much. But the shallot just packs an absolute punch. The same way that like a green onion is just like It's an onion, but it's different. That's the way the shallot is. And more people should be eating shallots, especially if you chop them up and make onion rings out of them. They make the best onion rings, little baby onion rings, and they're so, so good.
All right, Anthony Bourdain once said that if you go to a fine dining restaurant, it doesn't matter what they say they're doing. You've had a stick of butter. Butter is your friend when you're cooking.
Yeah. Now I understand butter can be expensive, and certainly the amount of butter that a restaurant can use can be expensive. I worked at a restaurant where we literally used to buy it, and it came in a 10-kilo brick, and we had to cut it down into smaller chunks so we could actually use it. But that's how much butter we were going through. Butter is delicious. It can make cheap things feel rich and indulgent because of its texture. There's nothing better than butter. But you can use this whether you're putting eggs in it. You can put potatoes in it. You can use these cheap things, sautéing some garlic and butter together, and then putting that on your bread or putting it on your burger is fantastic. And there's no way around it. Other ingredients that are amazing: eggs, which we've talked about before, potatoes, rice. Both potatoes and rice are real blank canvases. They can kind of be whatever it is you want them to be. You can buy enormous sacks of rice. And one thing, a rice cooker, if you're going to eat a lot of rice, you should just buy a rice cooker. And you might think, I'm good at cooking rice. This is what Grace thought. And she would tell me I cook good rice. And then finally, I just said, I'm going to buy you one. She was like, wow, that was so easy. You just pour it in. I didn't have to think about it. Yes. If millions of people across China and Japan and other countries are all buying rice cookers, you can give yourself permission to buy the rice cooker. And then you can put things in it other than water. One thing we like to do is take coconut milk and we pour that into our rice cooker. So the rice is cooking in the coconut milk. So once we get the rice out, it already has this beautiful, slightly sweet coconut flavor, which then pairs pretty readily with almost anything you might want to make, whether it's going to be a curry or whether it's going to be like a fish taco. Coconut rice goes so great with both.
How about if you threw in some chicken stock?
Sure, you can throw in chicken stock. Making chicken stock can be a little bit of effort, but you were just telling me before the show how happy you've been making your own chicken stock. And chickens, you can buy rotisserie chicken, shred it, and then use the bones to start your chicken stock. So you're sort of like, it's so much more economical because you're able to do that.
And there are so many places that specialize in almost a loss leader on the rotisserie chicken. So you get really economical chicken, and you discovered you don't have to do the step of roasting the bones to get the most flavor out of your chicken stock or chicken soup, because actually they've already done that for you.
Yeah, they've roasted. I like to re-roast them, but that's just an extra step that you don't have to do. I like it, though, because I want just very brown stock. But there's lots of things that are also... Anchovies are another great option.
Oh, I would never buy an anchovy.
Okay, but do you like a Caesar salad?
Does it have anchovies in it?
Yes, the secret to Caesar dressing is the anchovy.
Really?
And a lot of great pastas. If you wanted to make, a great pasta sauce, you can start with just a single anchovy and just sort of like break it down in it. By the time you're done, no one will know that it was in there, but they'll say there's just something about it. This sort of like umami-ness that you get from really cured, aged foods. Old soy sauces can be like this. Miso can be like this. These are huge benefits. Vinegar. People don't cook with enough vinegar. Vinegar should be a part of your life, and it isn't for a lot of people. And it's cheap. It's cheap. Acid makes food more flavorful. Anytime you thought, oh, I'll just give it a little squeeze of lemon, and that made it better. What you're doing is acid. Lemon is another kind of cheap ingredient that can just really elevate things. Just a little bit of fresh lemon. Even a $10 martini is not as good if you don't get a fresh peel of the lemon and put that lemon oil in there. It makes it great.
Okay, give me a tip on how I could cook with vinegar the next time I cook.
So what vinegar is so great is it's awesome at sort of creating a pop anytime you're sort of finishing something. So, okay, if you're trying to save a little bit of money, one of the easiest tips, right, is buy cheaper, tougher cuts and then braise them. Let them cook all day long so that they get nice and soft and they relax. That's delicious, right? There's tons of foods that are done like this, but you get them and maybe you're thinking to yourself, okay, but I have if I braise beef, I end up feeling like I have this really heavy meal. It doesn't have to be that way, because then you can put a little salad on, and if you pickle some shallots, or if you make a really vinaigrette forward type of salad, that's going to help cut everything. You're adding acid into it that's going to help cut that off. And just topping it with a little bit of vinegar is great, or adding some of the vinegar while you're cooking the meat can also help soften it. I like to make in the fall, we'll buy whole pork shoulder, we'll braise it off in apple cider, and I add some apple cider vinegar into it. So as it's cooking, it's already getting some of the acid incorporated that's going to balance out how rich the dish is going to be.
All right, now you have on your list here, as we're talking about big flavor, small tab here on Flavorphiles, you have canned tomatoes. Aren't fresh tomatoes better?
Fresh tomatoes are great when you can get fresh tomatoes. What happens outside of tomato season, sometimes you end up getting some greenhouse tomatoes that have absolutely no flavor. Additionally, you can end up spending quite a bit for them. One thing that's awesome about freezing and canning is what happens much of the time is there's tons of tomato crop over the summer, and then companies will buy all that up, they'll can them, they'll preserve them at the peak of their seasonality. So even when you're having one, I mean, this was the original reason we started canning to begin with, or if you can at home. This happens. Lots of people who have a garden will say, well, I have to make pickles, or I have to make tomato sauce, or I have to do this because the vegetable's going to go bad. So even though it's coming out of a can, good canned products are actually capturing peak seasonality, and you can have better flavor out of a can than you could have if you had fresh, because your fresh was grown out of season and it's terrible. In addition, canned foods tend to be fairly affordable, and then you can make things out of them, right? Like sauce. I mean, I love beans. I will still buy canned beans sometimes because it's just convenient.
All right, I want to ask you about sauce. Sauce is a big thing in a restaurant, maybe not as big in your kitchen as it could be unless you're already kind of advanced as a cook at home. So what kind of sauce would you make that could fit with everything and make me feel like I'm a real chef?
Okay, this is going to be so easy. Anytime you're searing something and cooking it, let's take a steak, for example. You're going to sear your steak, you're cooking it, you're then going to put the steak on the side. I'm going to give you a very quick recipe for the best sauce ever that also makes washing your dishes easier. You put the steak on the side, the steak needs to rest. You know how you have seared a pan and you have like all those crunchy brown bits that are in the bottom that then you're going to have to scrub and scrub? Please, God, don't do that. What you're going to do instead is you're going to take a little bit of wine, you're going to pour that in the pan, and it's going to immediately start to sizzle because of how hot the pan is. What that's doing is the wine is getting into those crunchy bits and it's lifting it up. All that flavor that was stuck to the pan is now incorporated into the wine. You're going to let that kind of get a little thicker. Then you're going to throw in just a little bit of butter. Those are going to emulsify. It's going to be beautiful and glossy. You'll just stir it together. If it feels too thin, add more butter. If it gets too thick, you're welcome. Sounds like an amazing sauce. And now you have a beautiful sauce that takes 1 minute to make and makes washing up simple.
On this episode of Flavorphiles, we're talking big flavor, small tab, and we're going to do a thing we do from time to time called short order cooking, where I hit Tanner with a bunch of questions in 10 minutes. And this is all going to be around overrated or underrated ingredients you could use as you're trying to save money but get big flavor while you're cooking at home. Most overrated, expensive ingredient.
Gold flake.
You use that.
I know I use gold flake. I use plenty of things that I might think are overrated. I'll also cook lobster for people. But gold flake is fun. But if you're trying to get big flavor and save money, gold flake doesn't have a lot of flavor and it's very expensive. So gold flake is a fun toy. It's sort of like if you were going to have a table where you want to have a bunch of like fog out there. So you take dry ice and you pour hot water over it and it starts to create foam and fog everywhere. It looks cool, but it doesn't make it taste any better. It's a toy. It's not a flavorant.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it tastes rich, but okay.
No, you feel rich while you're tasting it, but it doesn't taste rich.
What's the most underrated cheap ingredient?
Is going to be beans. Anything in sort of like the bean category, the legume category. Beans taste great, and there's so many different ones. There are ones that are enormous. There are little tiny ones. Like the beans, the lentils, These types of things have a ton of flavor. They have a bunch of fiber. They're very affordable. So you can eat these things readily. You can put them with lots of different things. They pair with many, many different things. Or you can use versions of them to kind of bolster what you're doing. I understand that like a peanut, you might go, that's not a bean. Okay, fine. But like a peanut, the peanut butter, you throw that in a sauce, it makes it thicker. It gives it a great flavor. These cheap types of ingredients are wonderful and should be a basis of more people's food.
All right, but you said during our patriotic Red, White, and Grill episode that the most overrated thing and that you can't stand is baked beans.
That's true. What I mean is like just the beans that are covered in molasses and sugar and put in a can. No, I mean like buy some black beans. You can open the can, you can pour them out, or buy beans and make them yourself. Hydrate them, cook them however you want to make them great. It's the syrupy canned processed baked bean. That's not what I'm into. Beans in general, I like. I'm not going to throw out every bean because a single individual bean has committed a crime. That would not be fair to beans.
Best food under $10.
Anything on the street. I have gotten sick a number of times eating street meat, but I will not allow gastrointestinal distress to discourage me from good flavor. There are awesome people making great food just out there on the street. And conveniently, they're generally located between the bar I'm leaving and the car I'm getting into. And so those people, those are the best things you can eat for $10.
What would you say is the best restaurant that doesn't really look like much from the outside?
Lots of times you see this of restaurants that were built generally by immigrants to a country because they're showing up. They don't have a lot of cash. They can't spend that cash on beautifying outside. They have to spend it on what's on the inside, the cooking utensils, the equipment, the ingredients. And so if somebody tells me, here's a restaurant, if I look on Google Maps, if a friend tells me it's great and Google Maps shows that it doesn't look very good, I know that there's good flavor hiding in there. And that's a great way to find it.
All right, this is a really interesting one. Best food out of a paper bag.
Oh, it's a tall boy of light beer, easily.
That's not really a food.
I would beg to differ. It has calories, it's carbs, and it's delicious. Something, I don't know, there's also, you know how you're not supposed to? Like, you're not supposed to drink while you're walking around town? There's something I think sort of fun about drinking beer out of a bag because you feel like you're not supposed to, but you're not actually hurting anybody. You're not really doing anything wrong. You just feel a little naughty. I love it.
Okay, so earlier we talked about how you might feel rich if you have gold flake, but it's kind of a dumb thing to put on food in a way, even though you do sell it at your restaurants. But what's an ingredient that makes you feel rich, even though it's actually cheap?
Again, beer out of a paper bag. No, I'm just kidding. That wouldn't be a real one. But cocktails at home. Cocktails are expensive when you go out because you're paying for a ton of the labor that's being delivered. You're paying for the space, all of that stuff, right? But you can make good cocktails at home. You can buy some nice glassware. You can buy some affordable liquors. You can learn to make some pretty, classic cocktails that are not complicated. They don't need to be expensive. And if you can even buy clear ice molds. I gave you one for Christmas a couple years ago. You can make clear ice at home. You can buy a couple of nice glasses and you can make yourself an old fashioned, a Manhattan, a martini, margaritas, where you go, this is really good. And there's something psychological when you buy beautiful glassware and then you make a nice cocktail on purpose. It feels really good and you can do it. There are great spirit products that aren't going to cost you even $1 an ounce. So when you make a cocktail for yourself that's amazing, and then you realize it only cost you $1.50, you can feel really good about yourself. You can feel rich even though you're not going out.
I'm going to tell you a funny little story here. Your fiance Grace gave me as a gift a little kit to smoke a cocktail, to put the smoke on the cocktail like you do at the restaurants. And I said to you, yeah, but I haven't used that. I don't have one of those torches. And you said to me, there's a pot shop around the corner from your house. And so I hadn't thought of that. So I went there and I got it and I brought it home and I was going to, you know what's not included?
The wood chips?
The fuel.
Oh, so you got to go back to the pot shop.
I got to go back to the pot shop and get that little container, I guess, and then I guess I'm set to go. But that will feel kind of cool to actually do my own smoky cocktail.
Of course, you make the old fashioned, and then there's different ways to smoke a cocktail, but then you smoke the cocktail, and some of the fun, like, cute little garnishes that you see at a restaurant you can buy, like on Amazon or restaurant supply stores. Mm-hmm. You can make these things at home. And I understand if you're saying, so Tanner's big advice is cook at home. Like, no, what I'm saying specifically is, like, with cocktails, it's a thing that a lot of people maybe feel intimidated by because they're not familiar. I don't have memories of growing up and my grandmother teaching me to make martinis. You know, so you don't, like, have that experience, but it's a lot simpler than people think, and it feels ritzy and fun. And it sounds like you get also to become a regular at your local pot shop, which I'm sure is a great experience.
Yeah, well, that'll be a change for me. So if money were a little tight, what's the one thing you would eat forever?
Tacos. I would eat tacos. I have eaten pretty much anything goes with tortillas. I have, for breakfast when I go camping, I'll put peanut butter in tortillas. I love tortillas. I love to eat them. I could eat them forever.
Okay. Well, and they're also cheap to buy. Like, they fit into that category of under $10 out on the street.
Absolutely. To genuinely make tortillas from scratch is a pain, because if you're going to start by nixtamalizing corn, you really have quite the process on your hands. But people make them pretty cheaply, super fresh. You can go places where you can literally see the tortillas, like, puffing as they're cooking them, because that's one thing is it's not just slamming it together and putting it on. It should puff. And I'll tell you, there is nothing more humiliating than having somebody who's made tortillas for 40 years teaching you how to make them, and you just watch theirs puff all day long, and they're just flicking them into the basket, and you're sitting there, and all yours are doing are just cementing onto the plancha and burning. Ask me how I know.
I think we probably can figure that out. What do you think is the best hole in the wall category?
You mentioned pho. Pho is an amazing one, right? Anytime you're having just something that's kind of hidden. I love Vietnamese food as just sort of a hidden little place because there's so much flavor. It's so fresh. It's so bright. I love it as a place where you might not notice it. It's easy for me to say tacos. Of course, I love them. But Vietnamese food is something I'm just so frequently impressed by the flavor people are able to create without trying to then spend on all of the other stuff. That's not to say there are not fancy high-end restaurants that are Vietnamese, or that it can't be that. There are some really nice high-end ones. Slanted Door comes to mind in San Francisco. But in general, Vietnamese gives a lot of flavor for the price point that they charge.
All right, and then finally, you're having somebody over. The cheap food you would serve that would still impress people that's not a taco.
Curry. Yeah, I would say like a coconut curry. We used to, I know this monkfish and octopus are not cheap ingredients, but we used to make an octopus, monkfish, coconut curry that was amazing. But curries are great. They're so flavorful. A lot of people, again, don't cook them because they didn't necessarily grow up, depending on how you grew up. But a really wonderful Thai curry is delicious, it's simple, and it's affordable.
All right, that's our episode of Flavorphiles, Big Flavor, Small Tab. Another 36 or 7 or something episodes are available at our webpage, flavorphiles.com. That's flavor, PHILES.com. Thanks for being with us.